Today we have some work to do on the Miata before the next event. I have to lift up the front of the car and clean the entire bottom side of the subframe. There is oil everywhere. There's oil on the side of the block, partially down the downpipe, on the top and the bottom of the subframe, and all over the suspension components on the driver's side. There's even some oil spray like on the top side of the fender. So we gotta clean all of that up. We gotta make sure that there is no potential fire hazards anywhere in the engine bay. After we take care of the front end, cleaning up all the oil, I have to then spin the car around and I have to re-weld on an exhaust hanger that's sheared basically clean off at the last event. We are gonna get right into this, start taking a couple of things off. I have to take the air cleaner and mass airflow sensor off of there to access the oil return line that was loose down in there. Make sure that's all clean and tight. I'm actually going to disconnect that from the bottom of the turbo and make sure the threads are okay on that fitting, and then attach that, retighten it down, make sure it is nice and snug so we don't have any more oil leaking out of that. We're also going to take out this downpipe shield and make sure that is nice and clean off everything that's back on the subframe or like the actual engine bay ledge right here, and probably shop vac some of this stuff out. There's rubber dust and dirt up on top of the coilover, and just make sure this is all nice and clean and ready to go. All of this is at least very easy to take out, so it doesn't take very long. We will just take a quick peek at the turbo in here. The cold side should be all good to go. There's not like a crazy amount of wiggle in there, just enough. Spins really good. Ball bearing turbo. It's always good to check your turbo. Now we'll take this exhaust shield out. Let's get it nice and clean. It feels all oily. There's not like a lot of standing oil on it, but it's greasy feeling. Now that we have everything kind of vacuumed out, blown off, maybe I'll drop the headlights too, get them out of the way. Then I can actually like lean on it, because getting to this 10AN line under the turbo is quite tricky. And I have a 1-inch wrench ground off on one side so it can fit between the line and the subframe. I just can't remember which way you gotta go. Because you can't turn it very far with the intake tube sitting here. You only got a tiny turn. I barely had that snugged up after it started leaking at the track too. Like, that didn't take much effort to get that broke loose, which is again kind of concerning because I went out and battled with like that, just barely tight. But I also heard some crunching when I was trying to tighten it down, so I don't know if I crunched some threads because it's just aluminum fittings. And it's been sitting for like a week now, so there shouldn't be oil sitting in the line. Yeah, this is really tricky to get to because there's a coolant line down here too, like the main radiator return. It's kind of a not so great design for putting it all together. I'm sure I could figure out rerouting that coolant line somehow. I'd have to do some fresh line. That's maybe a project for over winter. We'll see. There's quite a few things that I'd like to change and just haven't done it yet. That's off. All full of oil. Maybe if I can get that tucked out under to look at that. Yeah, the threads look okay. There's a little bit of aluminum grit in the threads though, just because of what was going on with it. But it's all full of oil. I'm gonna have to try and clean that really well, carefully, so you can get some clean part of the rag into the threads. Yeah, there's some aluminum shavings there. As long as it wasn't going into the oil, it should be fine. Which it shouldn't, because there's like a butt seal on there. Yeah, it should be fine. It's not real bad. I just got to get it all cleaned up, and then the whole line is soaked with oil too. So I'll get this rag kind of sprayed down with some brake cleaner and then clean that whole thing down there. I'm going to probably have to lift the car up, get this driver front tire off, and I can actually reach through and get the entire top side of the subframe back there by the downpipe cleaned off and scrape out all the junk. Got the car up in the air. Now I think you can probably see where the oil is, like this whole lower control arm is basically all oil. And then we got the upper control arm up here. There's actually like wet oil on the bushing, and the arm completely soaked. And then down on the subframe, all oil, and the downpipe is literally right there, almost touching the subframe. So all of that oil is extremely close to a very, very, very high temperature. That's not good. We're gonna get all that cleaned up. What I gotta do first is get the oil return that's up in there retightened back onto the turbo and make sure that is completely solid, nice and tight. Nothing looked like it was damaged. All the threads were in good condition. So we'll just get that positioned correctly, because you have to like finagle it between the coolant hose and the subframe mount that's like right behind the control arm there. There's like 1/4 of an inch of wiggle room, so you can't touch that on either piece because you don't want that turbo and engine like flexing over onto the subframe. You don't want any tension or anything on any oil lines like that. You want that stuff to be free floating and basically untouched by anything in the engine bay, or you could potentially have vibrating issues like I had. I just had to put the camera down, work on this a little bit. I got that oil return line tightened up. It's kind of a pain to get that tight in there. It is a very tight space to work with. I got fairly large hands and it's a very tight space. So got that all tightened up. I got the air filter and everything back on there. Top side is done. I took basically the entire can of brake clean to the subframe and got as much of this junk, oily dirt and grit, cleaned off the bottom as I could, so that is all taken care of. Everything underneath should be clean, ready to go. Now, while I have the front up in the air, I'm gonna do a nut and bolt check on all of the suspension components since I took the front tires off. Get all of that tightened up, basically put a wrench on every bolt and every nut up in the front end. Make sure everything is nice and snug, nice and tight. I already double checked the alignment up front. We are good. It is a 1/4 inch toe out. So then now we can just make sure everything is wrenched really nice and tight, nice and snug, so it doesn't come loose. All right, I think everything on the driver front is all tight. The lower ball joint, there's 3 bolts, one that holds basically the location on the lower control arm, and then the outer knuckle bolt. That was loose as well, so I tightened that all up. Now everything is nice and tight. Nothing shakes down here. It didn't really shake before, but like, you don't want anything to have any bit of movement while you're drifting. That can mess up your alignment big time, especially under load or under torque and twist on your suspension, and it can really mess with you while you're driving. So this is all tightened up over here. Now I'm gonna go do the passenger front, get that all tightened down, and then we're gonna get the front wheels back on, spin it around, do the same thing to the rear suspension, and then weld on an exhaust hanger on the back. Now I'm just gonna check the oil since we did lose some. I have the oil level typically a 1/2 quart over full just because of all the oil that goes into the turbo lines. Yeah, we're good, I think. I'll let the oil kind of settle because it was tipped towards the back of the engine anyways for a little bit. Yeah, we're still just a touch over the full line. We should be good. Should be in a safe level. We'll get it started up and then do a little loop real quick, back it in here, and get that exhaust hanger on. I got the car turned around, and I also got the welder set up so that we can weld the exhaust hanger on the back side of the diff back in place. And I might need to add a little extension, so I have an extra piece of stainless rod that we can weld in here Because right now, when you look at it, the muffler, or not muffler, but the actual pipe sits pretty decent in the cutout. Before, there was a little too much tension on it, and it was actually sitting on the plastic, the bumper, and it was melting. Like, the exhaust was getting hot enough to melt a 1/4 of an inch of plastic all the way through right there. So right now, it's sitting pretty straight, pretty even in there, and maybe we'll just give it a little bit of a push, not very much. And then right now there's a gap right there on the hanger, because this is the hanger that was broke off. Put a 1/2 inch gap, and we'll just take this 2-inch piece that I can't seem to grab because it's nice and smooth. We'll just stitch weld this together so that it kind of bridges that gap, and then I can weld both sides of this rod to the other rod and to the muffler so that it is hopefully just taken care of and we don't have to really worry about it for a long time. We should be all set. I think I got the welder set up where I need it. I'm gonna tack weld this rod onto the pipe first. It's a little dirty, but it should still burn. One tack, you should be able to kind of wiggle it and move it where you need still. All right, we got the one on there. We have to position this where we want it. I think that should be good like that. Now we'll tack weld that on. There we go. Now we'll tack it a couple more times and then we can burn it all on. Nice and toasty. That far back hanger is welded. That should be all good. It shouldn't go anywhere for at least quite a while, hopefully. I bent up another rod and I have a yellow mark right there where I need to cut it. I am instead going to put it on this hanger that's already mounted back here for the muffler pipe that I have up there. It utilizes this hanger, so I'm just going to use that because it's there, it's already there. And I'm just going to kind of pull the muffler or the pipe over a little bit and make sure it's nice and tight when I weld it on. That's going to actually hold the muffler, or I keep saying muffler, but it's just a straight pipe. It's going to hold the pipe over towards the passenger side so it doesn't shake so bad towards the driver's side and hit the subframe. Hopefully that should be enough and do the trick. That one is now on. This one is secured. Yeah, the welds don't look super great, but I'm welding stainless with stainless wire and the wrong gas. But hey, it welds and it stays. It's good enough for now. So now, with these two hangers back in place, or this one is new, but it's pushing or pulling that direction. That one up there pulls that direction. So now it should hopefully not shake so bad. So if we take the end of the pipe here and kind of give it a little wiggle, it almost like stops the shake immediately. Like before, it would shake and just like stay there or like keep shaking. Now it like kind of stops right away. And it doesn't bang on the subframe or the diff down there. It just touches the bumper a little bit when you push it real hard that direction. But that should be good. I'm a-okay with it hitting the bumper because that's soft rather than smacking the diff brace and the subframe over here. Way better. So everything in the back is all squared away. All of the repairs that needed to be done from the last event should be all taken care of, and everything should be a-okay for this Drifttoberfest coming up in just a couple of weeks, or I think it's only a week away now, so it's coming up pretty quick. I do need to change one tire. The one tire over here kind of tore apart down to the nylon cord. So I have this tire, I think it's the same tread wear, a 400, and it matches the tread on the other tire that is in the other garage. Now this event is basically just gonna be use all the tires that are kind of like takeoffs from other events, kind of like this one. Yeah, there's cord showing, but I'm gonna put this on the passenger side so that the outside of the tire gets wore off first. With the Drifttoberfest layout, you do two really long left-hand corners, so that outside of that tire should see all of the heat, all of the weight, and the majority of the use, and just it'll maybe make 4 laps, I'm hoping, and just burn it off. And then I have one takeoff that I can put on that side because the driver's side tire is still like 30 or 35% tread. So we're gonna leave that one alone and just put a scrub on the other side, do that again, make some more laps, and I'll probably just sit there and switch out the one tire until that tire goes dead as well. No, I'm not gonna show you guys swapping some tires around. I've done that in previous videos. So that's gonna wrap up today's episode of just doing some maintenance stuff and prepping for the next event. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.